Imagine a king whose presence and decisions echoed across the deserts, mountains, and valleys of the Middle East. A man whose authority was so imposing that his name still reverberates among scholars of ancient history. I refer to Nebuchadnezzar II, better known as Nabucodonosor, who lived approximately 6 centuries before Christ and stood out as one of the most feared rulers of Babylon. He is particularly remembered for leading the invasion of Judah and the subsequent destruction of the city of Jerusalem, leaving an indelible mark of his power. I can visualize the figure of a king whose presence and decisions spread across deserts, mountains, and valleys of the Middle East. His authority was so visible that his name still echoes among those who study ancient history. I refer to Nebuchadnezzar II, better known as Nabucodonosor, who lived approximately 6 centuries before Christ and stood out as one of the most feared rulers of Babylon. He is particularly remembered for leading the invasion of Judah and the later destruction of Jerusalem. Nebuchadnezzar II, as the eldest son of Nabopolassar, a former Babylonian general, not only took the throne, but also the charge of strengthening a nation that had recently freed itself from Assyrian rule. His father had led a victorious revolt against the Neo-Assyrian Empire, marking the beginning of what would become the Neo-Babylonian Empire. Babylon gained its freedom after nearly 100 years of subjugation around 646 BC, when Nabopolassar became king and began expelling the Assyrians from Mesopotamian lands. Over time, the invaders were gradually pushed northward. The battles moved near the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the center of the old Assyrian Empire. In 632 BC, a decisive offensive resulted in the conquest of Nineveh, the Assyrian capital. The remaining resistance fled to the region of Haran, where it was again attacked and defeated. The last Assyrian king managed to escape to Egypt, but any attempt to regroup his forces there failed. The collapse of the Assyrian Empire was consolidated. The death of Nabopolassar in 624 BC paved the way for Nebuchadnezzar II to ascend to the throne. His rise to power marked the beginning of a new era for Babylon. Determined to solidify the power recently acquired, he initiated a series of military campaigns and internal reforms. I understand that he knew that to maintain control over the vast conquered lands, it was necessary to show uncontestable authority and act with rigor against any challenge. His first actions were directed at plundering and conquering important areas such as Gaza, Ashkelon, and regions of Anatolia. As Babylon's wealth grew with these gains, Nebuchadnezzar II also devoted attention to developing the capital's infrastructure. He built walls, canals for water supply, paved roads, and erected monuments that would forever change the city's landscape. Among these constructions, one stood out, the famous Hanging Gardens, attributed to him and considered one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. However, financing such growth required more than spoils from small cities. It was necessary to focus on larger adversaries, and the first major target appeared on the horizon, Jerusalem. But before proceeding with this undertaking, an unexpected challenge arose. Assyrians, who still resisted, now allied with Egypt, joined forces to try to regain control of Babylon. This confrontation culminated in one of the most crucial battles of the time, the Battle of Carchemish. There, in 624 BC, Nebuchadnezzar II continued a war begun by his father. I see him leading the Babylonians against the Egyptians, commanded by Pharaoh Necho, and against the last remnants of the old Assyrian army. Egypt believed it could stop Babylon's advance, but underestimated the preparation and power of the opposing forces. Even before the main battle, an external event weakened the Egyptian army. King Josiah, ruler of Judah, tried to block Necho's advance at Megiddo. Although defeated and killed, his resistance caused significant casualties to the Egyptians and delayed their arrival at the battlefield. This delay was exactly what Nebuchadnezzar needed. When the forces finally clashed at Carchemish, the fighting was intense. Records show that Nebuchadnezzar II's conquests were not limited to the battlefield. He not only defeated empires and expanded territories, but also dedicated resources to infrastructure, culture, and architecture, leaving a trail of grandeur that lasted well beyond his lifetime. The destruction of Jerusalem, conflicts with Egypt, and the construction of the Hanging Gardens reveal the capacity of a king who mastered both the art of war and the strategy to secure his control. The victory over the Egyptians at Carchemish was not only the result of brute force, but a combination of the strategic weakening of the enemy and Nebuchadnezzar's tactical skill. The impact of this conquest was immediate. Egypt lost its influence in the Fertile Crescent, and Babylon established itself as the new dominant force in the region. For all observers, the message was clear. Babylon had taken control of the geopolitical destiny of the Middle East. From its borders at the Persian Gulf to the shores of the Mediterranean, Nebuchadnezzar's authority was now recognized as unquestionable. However, to establish total control, pending issues with former adversaries had to be resolved. One of these was the Kingdom of Judah, which, although formerly under Babylonian rule, continued to show acts of rebellion. At that time, Jehoiakim was on the throne, but his government grew increasingly bold in challenging Nebuchadnezzar's presence. Encouraged by promises of external support, especially from regional powers interested in containing Babylon's advance, Jehoiakim began a series of provocations. Nebuchadnezzar's response was swift. He gathered his army and marched against Jerusalem. The siege was prolonged but effective. When the city finally fell, Jehoiakim was deposed. His son Jeconiah ruled for a short time, soon replaced by Zedekiah, a name more aligned with Babylon's interests. Even so, stability was fragile. A few years later, Zedekiah decided to stop paying tribute to Babylon. This action, seen as a direct challenge, was accompanied by a series of revolts, including in Tyre, all fueled by expectations of Egyptian aid. In response, Nebuchadnezzar returned to Jerusalem. This time, there was no room for negotiations. The city was devastated, and what remained of Jewish hope was turned to rubble. Solomon's temple, the spiritual center of the people, was consumed by fire until it turned to ashes. The walls collapsed and the flames devoured not only structures but symbols. The people, defeated and humiliated, were taken into exile. Entire families crossed deserts toward Babylon in a silent march of suffering. This event became etched in the history of a civilization, detailed in sacred texts as the Babylonian captivity. With the conquest of Jerusalem secured, Nebuchadnezzar turned his attention to new targets. Expansion through the Levant and Mesopotamia continued unabated, marked by large-scale military campaigns without truce. Cities in Anatolia were again plundered, while desert tribes in Arabia also faced Babylonian force. Among these campaigns, one stood out for its resistance: the siege of the Phoenician city of Tyre. Located in what is now Lebanon, Tyre was an important commercial center protected by impressive fortifications. The siege, which began in 606 BC, lasted nearly 3 years, demonstrating not only the strategic importance of the city, but also Nebuchadnezzar's determination not to allow any weaknesses in his domain. Another significant target was the Kingdom of Elam, located east of Babylon, in lands that today are part of Iran. Again, the Babylonian king led intense attacks, reaching the Elamite capital, Susa, and devastating its structures. Control of this area further expanded Babylon's influence and secured access to important trade routes, solidifying a territorial supremacy that extended throughout the region. The conquest campaigns led by Nebuchadnezzar not only expanded Babylon's domains, but also ensured access to strategic resources and vital trade routes. With the empire's rapid growth, he turned his attention to what would sustain this power: internal stability. Fortifications were expanded, new walls were built around the capital, and central administration was decisively reinforced, capable of maintaining control over the vast conquered territory. The architectural grandeur of Babylon. Among the many initiatives that shaped the city's magnificence, the Hanging Gardens stand out. Known even today as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, they were more than a display of beauty. They demonstrated technical mastery and architectural creativity. Many believe these gardens were built by order of Nebuchadnezzar to please his wife, Amytis, Princess of Media, a mountainous region in the northwest of present-day Iran. Missing the lush vegetation of her homeland, Amytis was said to have been honored with this artificial oasis, built on arid land and nourished by a complex irrigation system. More than a romantic gesture, the gardens showed everyone that, under Babylonian rule, Even the impossible could be achieved. However, the gardens were only part of a much more ambitious architectural project. Another symbol of Babylon's power was its colossal wall, a structure that surrounded the city and made it nearly impenetrable. It is said to have been wide enough for 2 chariots to pass side by side on its top. Guarding the main city entrance stood the imposing Ishtar Gate, covered with deep blue glazed bricks and adorned with high-relief figures of bulls and dragons. This gate was more than an entrance. It was a parade of glory and dominance, through which victorious armies passed as they returned from military campaigns. At the spiritual heart of the capital, Nebuchadnezzar ordered the reconstruction of the Asagala temple, dedicated to Marduk, the city's chief deity. There, the king not only worshipped the gods, but also presented himself as the divine representative on earth. Complementing this religious initiative, he also erected the great ziggurat known as Etemenanki, approximately 91 meters tall. This monumental structure, visible from miles away, symbolized the connection between heaven and earth, affirming Babylon's central role in the world. The end of a remarkable reign. After 43 years of rule, in 582 BC, Nebuchadnezzar died, leaving the throne to his son, evil Merodach. His reign was marked by wars, grand constructions, territorial expansion, and the consolidation of an unprecedented power in the ancient world. History records him not only as a king of notable military feats, but as the true architect of a city that would become synonymous with splendor and power. Nebuchadnezzar II's conquests go far beyond the battlefield. He not only defeated empires and expanded borders, but also invested in infrastructure, culture, and architecture, leaving a legacy of grandeur that transcended his own time. The destruction of Jerusalem, the conflicts with Egypt, the construction of the Hanging Gardens, all of these reveal the mind of a king who knew how to wield both the sword and strategy to consolidate his rule. If you enjoyed learning about this fascinating part of history, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new content about the figures and events that shaped the world. Leave your like, share with those who love history, and comment below which historical figure you'd like to see in upcoming videos.